Hi, this is Larry Hatch, and this is our 12th episode of 10 New and Modern Words for Success and Better Communication. I know I've been long winded a lot of times on these videos, up to 24, 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to cut that down a little bit. But I want to offer full explanations of these terms to the best ability I can, but hopefully that'll encourage you to look at other websites devoted to the term or giving more information. There are other YouTube videos on these subjects, and I'll try to point that out when I can. Our first term today is Full Service History, FSH, as it's known in the trade, and that's the record of an individual serialized purchase product, typically a car or a boat, with a very complete history documentation of all the maintenance and repair events. And it doesn't apply, it has nothing to do with the history of the kind of automobile or boat, but the individual product. In other words, a particular car with a VIN number, or a particular boat with a HIN number, HIN, hull identification number, and it's tied to an individual boat or car or truck or what have you, motorcycle. In high-end bicycles, they do that as well. As you know, some of the high-end bicycles can be $3,000-$4,000 on up, and way up. And basically, this is different than a Carfax. A Carfax basically tells you what's been reported. This is stuff that's much more complete. It will typically have receipts, from the dealership. Oh, I got my 100,000 mile maintenance package. I got my brakes done, at Joe's Brake Shop. I did my oil myself, and here are the receipts for the purchased oil and filter to hopefully prove I did it. And again, it's not something that's going to be, unless you have all your work done at the dealership, which frankly most people don't do. Maybe you go to a fast change oil place, or maybe you were out of town and you had to have service and didn't go to your typical dealer, or like I say, maybe you did the oil change or brake job or whatever yourself. I mean, what person wouldn't want to replace their own air filter? But on a full service history, you'd put in the receipt for, did I say brake filter? Air filter. And you'd include that in there. Some people are really meticulous about their cars, and they'll even put in like all the information when they had it detailed. Might be a little excessive, but certainly your tire purchases. Typically, you wouldn't buy your tires at the dealer. You'd be, I dare say, paying maybe too much. Although I've had car dealers give me very fair tire prices. I'm gonna say that. So anyway, it's a complete history, as complete as possible. Usually, it's in a book, and if you're looking at high-end cars, you definitely want an FSH. So it's something that you put together yourself. Again, unless you did absolutely everything with the dealer, one dealer. And by the way, they probably won't share that history with another dealer that you're selling the car at. So just be aware of that. The next term is daily sequestration. I heard about this as a concept, but I didn't have a term for it. And then we had a new coach come to our local university who had a degree from Carnegie Mellon. He was a very intellectual coach, put it that way, with a higher IQ than most, that is academic IQ. And his first press conference, he says, "Well, how do you handle things?" And he refused to talk about the upcoming opponents. He says, I do things one day at a time. I just worry about one game at a time, one day at a time. All we can control is the current day. And he says we sequester things in day-tight compartments. We sequester things in day-tight compartments. And I was like, wow. And the media were all looking at each other like, day-tight sequester? Oh, we know what compartments means. But that was his way of saying he did daily sequestration. And I'm sure there's other names for it, but that's the first one I found. And it's the practice of living or working one day at a time, assigning to a day or a group of days a specific concern or activity, putting it on the calendar in advance, set it and forget it. In other words, that day's problem is that day's problem, and you don't worry about it today. And this all helps you minimize stress and worry. It's a type of a time management system where you break down things into small timed units so they're more manageable. I'll give you a case in point if you're doing like a home improvement. Today is bathroom tile day. Tomorrow is paint the living room day. Next Saturday is get the furniture reupholstered. And then on Sunday, we're going to tear out the kitchen. The following Saturday, we're going to put in the new appliances. The following Sunday, we're going to paint the kitchen. So each day has a function. And rather than let the whole project just drive you crazy and be too much, you break it down into little daytime chunks. And sometimes you do it hour by hour that day. But you say, this problem or this thing belongs to that day, and I'm going to assign it there, and I'm not going to worry about it until maybe the day before when I have to do some preparation, or that day. So you just get up in the morning and say, what is today's task? And you may not even remember because you took the whole massive thing, and rather than worry about it, you divided it into pieces and assigned a day for each one. So that's a kind of a cool thing, and it works for most of us. I do that all the time. If I got something that's frankly overwhelming, I just break it down into little pieces each day. The next term we've heard since COVID quite a bit is the new normal. It's a change in state, practices, expectations, and metrics after a crisis. And that's in terms of economic, cultural, and social issues. And it's often a permanent change. That is the new status quo, the new normal. And the reason it's a permanent change is that new laws were enacted, new standards, new attitudes. And while we heard the new normal during COVID, the term actually was used limitedly well before that. There have been new normals, according to Wikipedia, after the HIV crisis. Obviously, people weren't doing as crazy things as they were after HIV. Obviously, there was a new normal after 9/11, especially in terms of airplane travel. And so anytime there's a crisis, whether it's a health crisis or a terrorism crisis or a political crisis, we have a new normal. And that's because there's new laws, new standards that society puts on itself, and new attitudes. So sometimes these are legally enforced, sometimes these are just social norms, attitudes that if you transgress them, you'll get put down quite quickly. And like I say, it's pretty broad. There's economic issues, there's cultural issues, there's social issues. I probably should have used the word security. There's all kinds of things that come after a crisis. The next term is the inner moral compass. Some people just say moral compass. But it's an internal guide that we all have, whether it works or not, to ethical conduct, or I could say moral conduct, affecting all our decisions, based on our belief systems and values, showing a true north, and that's why we use the compass analogy, as our correct bearing or heading or direction, whatever you want to call it. And an internal moral compass is, we're holding this compass due north based on our value system. And this is not just a religious thing. We might have other values, that have nothing to do with religion per se, whether we don't believe in, eating animals or wearing fur or supporting certain groups, or, it goes way beyond religious morals. It has to do with our ethical conduct, and so on. And, these days, my God, what some people consider ethical and non-ethical is just pretty complicated. But anyway, that's our own internal compass, and if we see the compass deviating, we try to go towards due north to feel like we're headed on the right track. The next term is Gen Z, Generation Z, or the Zoomers. There's actually a whole lot of words for it, but Gen Z seems to be the accepted one. Zoomers is also used, and it's a demographic cohort. A cohort is a group of people or organisms that have something in common. Probably should do that as a definition. And these were generally born between 1995, although one source says 97, and the mid 2010s, let's say 2015. So anywhere, 1995, 2005, 2015. And these are the children of the Gen Xers, and sometimes the millennials or Gen Ys. There's an extensive study on Wikipedia and other sources as to the characteristics of Gen Z, especially if you're into sociology and marketing. They have certain characteristics. They tend to be very digitally savvy, but probably not as much as the millennials. And it's interesting, their habits. They consume less alcohol than their parents, and so on. And they're called the Zoomers because they're after the Boomers. So anyway, that's a whole thing you can study if you're interested. And of course, many of us, not me, I was born in '59, and our relatives and friends are in this group. And we certainly work with people in this group considerably. So there's a lot of Gen Zers out there. Our next term is a narco sub, also called a drug sub. And it's kind of a whole science almost, because these have been found all over the world. And it's an underwater ship or submarine used to distribute and traffic illegal drugs, typically narcotics, to avoid detection by going underwater. Usually having 1 to 2 human occupants. They're very small, they're usually like 10 to 20 feet long. They're not like a military sub. And they're usually long and tubular. They even make them out of like big propane tanks, that kind of size. Just think of the biggest propane tank that's horizontal and tubular, and that's sort of the size. And they're heavily loaded with product. They might need 2 people in there, like one for direction and one for driving, maybe one for security or whatever. But sometimes they just have one person because they want to get as much product in there as possible. And these things usually, they can be successful. They tend to find them when it leaks and the driver drowns, or they run aground on something and can't get loose. They're actually small enough, and you can see pictures of these if you Google images, or Bing images, I should say, or Yahoo images, and you can see pictures of them. They're pretty crafty things, and We all know the drug industry has lots of money, so they can be fairly effective things. And like I say, with the Coast Guard and others looking for ships and planes, going underwater is, well, pretty clever, pretty darn clever idea. So anyway, that's a whole thing, and it's kind of interesting. So I put it in there. Some of you might want to read up more on that. The next term is strange, and I immediately want to refer you to a Ron White stand-up comedian video on Tiger Woods. He kind of uses that in context. Strange is not a person so much as a practice, I guess you'd say, partner. It's a new sexual partner outside an established marriage, union, or relationship. In other words, a strange or unfamiliar person. Where the unfaithful party seeks unfamiliar and perhaps dangerous interactions. And, it's like I say, it can be dangerous if you get caught, both physically and monetarily. And, but some people, let's say men and women, get addicted to unfamiliar liaisons, and it's kind of a thing, And this term expresses that getting some strange is a term that's out there. The next term is fair trade, and we see this in relation often to food products. I see it often in relation to tea and coffee that I might consume. And it's a reaction to past abuses, whether colonial or neo-colonial, big corporations. And it's a set of products that are for sale where the suppliers, growers, producers, and hopefully the lowest level workers, the field workers, are not exploited and given wages and prices considered equitable and reasonable for their specific culture. Okay. Somebody in Guatemala picking coffee beans is not going to make $20 an hour, but they're going to make what is a good, sustainable living based on somebody's standards for that area. And there is a fair trade certification system, so it is actually a legal term now, at least in the United States. And you can get, sort of like organic. There's different levels of certification and organizations, but you can get a fair trade stamp on your product if you meet certain conditions. And if you look up these organizations, they'll tell you how that's determined and how that's monitored and enforced and all that. Some people consider this highly important, that they don't want to buy products that exploit local workers. And I kind of, it helps me. It's not to the point where there's enough of it so that I'm going to go that way as opposed to another way. I still go for the quality of the product. But if I do see fair trade, I'm kind of okay with that. Fair trade can also apply to artwork, crafts, arts and crafts. Because, people were like buying things from Africa and Asia and India, Singapore, I think. Yeah, Singapore. And the people were getting like a penny for this beautiful piece of art that would sell for $100 in a gallery. They're getting like a bowl of rice for something that sells for $200 or $300 in a gallery. That's lovely. Anyway, but as you can imagine, human nature being what it is, anybody who can be exploited will be exploited. And here's the kicker. I'm waiting for fair trade cell phones. Ha ha ha. Let's see if that happens. And sneakers. Our next term is Instaslum. And wow, I as soon as I heard this term, I said I know exactly what they're talking about because there's one not too far from my neighborhood. It's a new building, therefore instant construction, which by its design, colors, and materials appears to resemble a poor, rundown dwelling from day one. And I'll tell you, this apartment building complex is, oh my God, it's not even for students. I don't know what it is, and I actually looked it up, and it's kind of expensive. I don't know if they think it's hip or something, but it's a straight box. It's just a complete box, no porches, no balconies, no fancy decorations. It's just a box with windows in it, and the panels in it are like gray and pastel colors. They look like they've faded in the sun. The windows look cheap. Everything about it looks cheap. I mean, it's just a box with windows, and it's just horrible. There's no fancy lamps or amenities or architectural features of it's just ugly. And when they defined this Instaslum, I knew exactly what they were talking about. I have seen developments, government housing projects that look better than some of these things. My God. I don't know if they got really architects with bad skills, or they just bought the cheapest box design they could find, or they picked the wrong colors. Apartment building that's gray, all gray with no balconies or nothing. That's just, ugh, you know. Uh, and it's very minimalist, but it just looks like an old rundown building from Eastern Europe or something. Those old Soviet style things that were designed to house 1,000 people for as cheap as possible, kind of thing. I think we probably all could find one of those in our city if we live in a big enough city. The next term is a ketovore diet, and that is a meal program which combines the best features of two different diet regimes: the ketogenic or ketosis diet, known as keto, and the carnivore style diet. And so they put keto and carnivore together. And it's usually high in protein, fatty meats, generally less vegetables and more meat than pure keto diet. And there's a zillion YouTube videos and websites with recipes on this stuff. I'll be honest with you, that's what I'm doing right now, and I have for about it's almost 9 months now. And I started out with a carnivore diet because I wanted some of the benefits. And again, I only looked at carnivore diet videos done by MDs and nutritionists. I didn't want to, get, you know, some bias. So I only looked at these from professionals, and I looked at some research papers. I kind of got tired of all the meat and cheese. That's hard to say for me. Tired of the cheese. Wow. I still do a lot with eggs, but a ketovore diet gives you more options than a pure carnivore diet, and it's an omnivore diet. And by the way, omnivores are interesting. They're creatures that eat both plants and animals, and humans are omnivores. So are most primates. People don't know chimpanzees actually eat monkeys and other animals, just like humans do. Bears are very much carnivores. So are skunks, lots of kinds of birds because they eat eggs and so on. But it's kind of interesting. But the ketovore diet takes the advantages of both ketosis and a carnivore program and puts those together. And if you're so inclined to go with something that's not too restrictive, a ketovore diet is like eating scrambled eggs for breakfast, a steak for lunch, and some um, chicken and rice with cheese for dinner. Not terribly sacrificed, but it involves, you're not going to eat massive. You're not going to eat a whole pizza. You're not going to eat a whole bowl of spaghetti. Um, you're not going to eat lots of organic fruits and salads necessarily. Um, but anyway, that's something maybe worth exploring. So thanks for your time. Please comment. Please disagree if you like, and we'll go from there. Thank you.